So I'm going to start this evening by introducing first Senator David Blount. He is a graduate of Davidson College and the University of Virginia and represents a portion of Hinds County. He's a member of the Mississippi Association of Realtors, the Byram Chamber of Commerce, and Leadership Jackson, and he serves on the board of directors of the Mississippi Coalition Against Domestic Violence and the United Way of the Capital Area. Elected to the State Senate in 2008, Senator Blount is chair of the Gaming Committee and vice chair of the Education Committee. He also serves on accountability, efficiency, and transparency, elections, finance, highways and transportation, Medicaid, public health and welfare, public property, and the universities and colleges committees. Senator Blount, I will turn it over to you to make some opening remarks.
Great, thank you, Nancy. I'm happy to be here. I'm a big fan of the Parents Campaign from my entire time in the legislature, and I'm happy to be here with my friend, Representative McCarty. It's been a good year for education so far, and I think we have some positive things that we're hoping to get done in the last 2.5 weeks of the session. And I'm happy to talk to your members, your people on the call tonight. I represent part of the Jackson Public School District, part of the Hinds County Public School District, and formerly represented part of the Clinton Public School District. And education is why I ran for office in the first place, and I'm happy to be here tonight.
Thank you. All right, and Representative Kent McCarty is a native of Hattiesburg and represents a portion of Lamar County. A graduate of the University of Southern Mississippi and a small business owner, he is affiliated with the Pine Belt Foundation, the Development Committee, and the Area Development Partnership. Campaigning on a public education platform, Representative McCarty was elected to the House of Representatives in a special election in 2019 and was re-elected later that year to a full term. He serves as vice chair of the House Education Committee and is also a member of the Accountability, Efficiency, and Transparency, Banking and Financial Services, Conservation and Water Resources, and Universities and Colleges Committees. Representative McCarty, would you like to make some opening remarks?
Absolutely. Thank you again, Nancy, for having us on tonight. I think this is a great opportunity for us to talk with you and all the people on this call about what's going on in education. You mentioned this, and like Senator Blount, I also ran, education was the whole reason that I ran for office originally in 2019. And, that's kind of to me what it's all about. So I thank you. And I've said this before to Nancy, but I think without groups like the Parents Campaign, my election never would have happened the way that it did. So I'm very appreciative for the work that everybody involved in this group and others does to push public education in Mississippi and to promote, causes that are good for our students and our teachers, because that's in turn good for all of us. So thank you again for having us, and I look forward to the questions tonight.
Great, thank you both. All right, so we have, what I've done in the interest of time is to group the questions that were emailed in by topic. So I'm just going to read off the ones that we've gotten. For example, I'll start with MAEP. That's the subject that we've gotten the most questions about so far. So I'm going to read off the questions that we've gotten about MAEP and then toss it back to you two to answer those kind of in general, because they're basically all asking the same general thing. How can we get more money for MAEP? So here are the questions. Given that 90% of Mississippi's workforce gets their training in our public schools, and that educating all children well and equitably is the wise and moral thing to do, how can we convince our legislature and statewide leaders to significantly increase our investment in K-12 education? The next MAEP question is, level MAEP funding actually means a cut when you consider teacher salary step increases, insurance and PERS contribution increases that districts have to pay. Do you expect MAEP funding to be increased this year? The next MAEP question is, our neighboring states outspend Mississippi by an average of $1,200 per student. That lack of resources puts Mississippi students at a disadvantage. I believe we would have been better prepared to respond to the pandemic had our schools been better funded. More students would have had access to computer devices, and districts would have had digital management systems in place to support them. Citizens have consistently expressed their support for better public school funding. How can we get there? And finally, many state leaders say that in order to strengthen our public schools, we need more spending at the local level rather than the state level. What is your response to this when we know the disparate tax bases across the state have widely varying abilities to sufficiently fund their local schools? What can Mississippi do? And local taxes will probably always play a role in how well our schools are funded. Thoughts about MAEP funding?
I'm happy to jump in on this if we're just gonna kind of popcorn it. I think last year with the pandemic and everything, just to start off, I was really pleased to see that though the whole budget was obviously affected by the huge shortfall that we were anticipating, the department or the area of government that was cut the least was education. So I thought that was a positive in a year where things were really looking, there were at the early set of the pandemic, we were concerned that we may be, several $100 million, 500 million or more behind budget estimates. And so I was really concerned about what that meant for education. And I was excited as a newer member who's not a part of the appropriations process. I was excited to see that in the face of all that, we were able to spare education the brunt of that. So not being someone who's involved in appropriations yet, really, I don't know what this year looks like. I mean, I obviously am hopeful that we see increased funding, especially on last year, based on last year's number, since that was a slight reduction from the year before. But I hope to see that increase to a level that, I don't think we'll get fully funded in AEP this year, of course, but I would hope that we get as close to that as we can. And I guess it's a little unfair for me because I get to hide behind I'm not on the committee, so I can't, I'm not involved in the process yet. But, that's something that I obviously hope to see. You mentioned the local contribution. I think that's definitely one of the quirks in all this that, like my area, I guess when you cap out the contribution that a local tax base can contribute, when you're underfunding MAEP, it really harshens the effect on districts who don't have that tax base. So, my area is fortunate, although we're not even towards the top end of those who with the more rich tax base in Lamar County, but we are able to meet our needs locally in a lot of ways that a lot of areas in the state can't. And I think that's the real trouble with us chronically underfunding education, that the areas of the state who aren't able to do that, who can't make it up locally, they're left with huge shortfalls and unable to meet basic needs in their district. So that, to me, especially when you look at it over a long period of time, is what's got us in the situation that we're in some of these lower income, higher poverty areas in the state where they don't have the resources to keep up like we do other places. So when we're looking at equity, that's what we strive for. We're not hitting that mark, and we've got to address that. And the way to do that, the easiest way to do that and the hardest way at the same time, is by fully funding the formula that we already have in place. So that kind of touches on a little bit of all that with MAP. Senator Blount may have or definitely will have a more, hands-on view of the funding process, because he is certainly more senior than me in the legislature.
Senator Blount? Senator, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. I thought we ought to know how to do this by now. I think I apologize. Thank you, Representative McCarty. I think I agree with much of what he said. I mean, starting with local property taxes, obviously, basing funding for education on local property taxes is inequitable from the start, and that's why we have the MAE formula in the first place. When it was first passed, it's designed to do two things. One is adequacy and one is equity. And the formula acknowledges and is protected the state of Mississippi from lawsuits in this regard. It acknowledges that we have richer and poorer parts of this state. And so we have a good formula. There was an effort a few years ago to scrap that formula. That effort was defeated in the state Senate when a few of us in a bipartisan vote voted against the effort. MAP is sound. Look, no formula is perfect. People want to talk about changes in an open, transparent, inclusive way. Happy to do that. But the reason we have the MAP formula and the reason why it's fundamentally sound is it does address issues of equity in areas of our state that are poorer or wealthier, and recognizing that every child deserves a quality education wherever he or she lives. Let's see, I made some notes here. As far as the budget for next year, we are ahead of the estimate in revenue collections for this year. That money can be moved forward. We're still waiting to see how the Stimulus Act that the president signed today affects the budget for next year, but I'm optimistic that we can increase funding. I'm also optimistic, and I'm sure we'll get to this, that we can pass a teacher pay raise bill this year, which will require additional funding. Obviously, if you're going to raise pay for teachers, you're going to have to increase funding for education to pay for that raise. We've got a plan to do that. We think we can do that. MAP is sound. It needs to be funded. I'm hopeful that we can increase funding this year. We're still waiting to see how the new Stimulus Act affects the state budget. I mean, the ink is barely dry on it. I want to say that we, the legislature, again, in a bipartisan way, acted, I think, very wisely and quickly in getting laptops, Chromebooks out to every single student in Mississippi. And we did it efficiently and in a more cost-effective way than just about any state in the nation. So when we look at the new federal stimulus act, I hope we can do that again. But funding is critical, and this issue may come up later in the conversation tonight. The first step to funding is to not cut taxes. The first step to funding is to not eviscerate the budget with a massive tax cut. The difference between state government and the federal government is we are going to balance the budget. So as revenues decline, and revenues means tax collections, as those are cut and the budget shrinks, funding for education will shrink. And we can fund education if we can grow our economy. We can fund education without raising taxes if we'll just leave the taxes alone and have it go to the budget and work to increase funding for education. That's what we should do.
Thank you both. So we've had a question put in the chat that says, that's related, that says, with funds steadily coming in from the lottery, will education get its fair share?
The answer to that is yes. We do have a lottery. Frankly, I didn't vote for the lottery. I think it's inequitable, but we have it. And the lottery law says that the first 80 million in net profit to the state selling lottery tickets is the first $80 million goes to infrastructure, to highways, and any money over that 80 million goes to education. And I will tell you, Mississippians are buying a lot of lottery tickets. We think that the net increase, the amount above 80 million, could be as high as $40 million. That money will all go to the Education Enhancement Fund. So I'm optimistic that there'll be additional money for education because of the lottery.
Representative McCarty, would you like to speak to the lottery?
Yeah, I mean, Senator Blount, hit the nail on the head there with that. I think that's kind of what the numbers that I had been shared with as well, that we've already crossed the $80 million threshold as of either early this month or late last month. So basically everything else coming in between now and the end of this fiscal year at the end of June is going to go to education. So it does go to the Education Enhancement Fund. And I think the way that it's set up, early learning collaboratives are underneath the umbrella of that money. So, I think that would be an excellent area for us to spend some of this extra money that's coming in from the lottery, put that towards early childhood education, expanding that program that's done so well in the limited basis that we have it now, I would love to see, that be I think that's an excellent use of that money. Since it is somewhat restricted, obviously it's not going to come into the general fund and then go straight to MAEP, but it'll be, kind of cordoned off in that education enhancement fund where it can then be divvied up through the things that fall under that umbrella. So I wasn't here to vote for the lottery, but I think anything that allows us the opportunity to spend more money in education is a good thing.
Okay, thank you. The next topic is teacher pay. We've had 2 questions submitted about teacher pay, and I'll read those and let you all answer them at will. They say teachers in our state are facing incredible obstacles that they are having to overcome daily. Personal family issues, illness, constantly changing circumstances, state testing, etc. What will you be doing this legislative session to ensure that teachers are compensated, and not necessarily monetarily, for their tremendous efforts that go far beyond this year? And then the next question is, do you expect the teacher pay raise to pass, and will we get a better pay raise next year? Teachers can hardly pay our bills. Some of us have to work 2 or 3 jobs.
I'm optimistic that we're going to get that done. Let me say 3 specific things, and I'll not go into great detail because I know Representative McCarty is as committed to this as I am, and I don't want let him have some time to discuss them as well. Teacher pay. The Senate has passed a teacher pay raise bill for the 2nd time this year. That bill has been sent to the House. If the House concurs in that bill, in other words, if the House will agree that that's a good bill, they can vote yes, and it goes to the governor, who indicated he will sign it. So we will have a teacher pay raise this year if the House will take the Senate amendment, which is passed the Senate last week, vote yes, send it to the governor. I believe Governor Reeves will sign it, and our teachers will get a raise, and our teachers' assistants all have. Representative McCarty, he can speak to the issue of reciprocity, which I think is going to help teachers as well. And he and I have worked together on a teacher loan repayment bill that will help attract new teachers in the profession by paying down their college loans if they agree to teach in a Mississippi public school. And the amount that we would repay to those loans will go up each year over a 3-year period. So those are a few things that we're doing for teachers this session. I'm optimistic about all of them. And I'll let Representative McCarty go into some more detail on some of those.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Blount. I could not agree more. I think we've got a lot of good action on some things that will be very helpful for our teachers. Of course, starting with the pay raise, I'm very hopeful that the House will quickly concur on the bill that the Senate has sent back to us. It's just basically the same bill that we passed nearly unanimously earlier in the session in the House. No real changes to it. I see no reason why we would not concur with that legislation and send that to the governor as quickly as possible. I mean, I think that should be done. We should waste no time on that. So I think our teachers deserve some peace of mind there. I know that the pay raise has gotten caught up in a lot of the politics of this session, which I think is very regrettable. But I think it's time for us to do that and then show them that we are committed to that. I think going forward with the pay raise, I think the next thing we need to do, and I hope that we are able to look at this now that we have a true, quote, off season, since we're finishing up relatively on time this session, unlike last year that dragged on forever because of COVID. We need to look at a comprehensive long-term pay raise plan so that teachers, current teachers and those looking at entering the profession can have a better idea of what the horizon looks like. When we keep doing these one-off $1,000 raises, $1,500, $750, whatever, $500, those are all great. And I know that the teachers they appreciate that, but we need to show the commitment that almost all of us who are elected ran on in 2019, especially all of our statewide officials, of a long-term teacher pay raise plan to get us to the Southeastern average. Hopefully, again, that is something that I think we can look at and say, when we have a better idea what the budget numbers look like this summer, we know, with COVID settling down, the economy should be picking back up. We can look at it and say, well, how can we do a 4-year, 5-year plan that we can pass into law now, not a 1-year plan with a promise to do more, but a long-term plan that can get us to the Southeastern average. I think would be huge for recruitment and retention of teachers, because young people, they see it and they're entering college, and that's partially what, the Loan Repayment program that Senator Blount mentioned that we worked on together will address as well. But, they're thinking out 5, 10, 15 years, and they're basing that on what they see in front of them right now. If we could give them a roadmap for this is what we're going to do to ensure that you're paid more fairly, and paid like you deserve, that may make it easier to recruit teachers, from the ground up. So I think that's a very important thing for us to look at. The reciprocity law that we passed, the House passed it. The Senate, I think we have to go to conference. I think there might be a reverse repealer in that one. So we'll have to handle that, through conference. But that would allow us to offer a full 5-year license to any teacher who's licensed and in good standing in another state, which I think will be great for helping us recruit. I know before they were, I think, offered a provisional temporary license. This would take that away and do a full 5-year license. And then the teacher loan repayment program that Senator Blount mentioned is something, we passed the House version of it because that's just the way it fell this year. But I do have to give him credit for doing almost nearly all the legwork on that one. It's funny, we were on a Zoom together the other day, and I mentioned this story, but I got looped into that because I ran into him at Walgreens, in downtown Jackson, and we were talking about it in the parking lot. And he, told me the idea of the bill and said, "Would you like to offer the companion bill in the House?" And I said, "Absolutely." It sounded like a great idea and a great way to recruit new teachers, while they're in college and get them into a teacher education program. So Senator Blunt's been a great ally, obviously, of education and of me in the Senate, and we've worked together on several bills in my time here so far. So I look forward to continuing to do that, especially as it pertains to education.
Excellent, thank you. And there's a follow-up question on teacher pay in the chat that says, when you make these decisions about teacher pay, why not include those whom you are doing it for? We know best what would be fair, talking about teachers, including teachers. So you mentioned the study. Do you anticipate including teachers in that conversation?
Absolutely. I mean, I completely agree with the question, the premise of the question. I mean, we do so much up here without consulting the people who are directly impacted. And I think that's when you get really bad legislation. And that's when you see us having to go back and fix legislation because we didn't consider, we don't know what we don't know. And nobody in the chamber is currently teaching. So they don't have that firsthand account of the profession like all of you do. So I would certainly say anything we do like that, I think there needs to be teachers and administrators brought to the table, and activists as well who know and speak to teachers on a much greater scale than we're able to. So, if we're able to do something like that this summer, I'm sure that, if I have any control over it, we'll absolutely, be consulting teachers and people on the ground.
Absolutely, we will. We have and this is what's so refreshingly different in the Senate this term compared to the way it used to be. We have regular communications with the Lieutenant Governor, the Senate Chairman, Senator Dennis DeBar of Leakesville, and the leading teachers organizations in the state, MPE, AFT, MAE. They're at the table. We sit down with them in advance. We go through everything that we're going to do. We ask for their input. We need more. If you are a teacher, I encourage you to get involved in one of those associations so you have a voice. We look to those associations, and of course we look to the Parents Campaign.
Excellent, thank you. And yes, we have been included, and it's wonderful. It's so refreshing. Let's move to pre-K because I know we don't have too much time left. The question says, what is your position on expansion of pre-K in Mississippi? Do you think we'll get a 4-year-old program statewide soon? What about pre-K for 3-year-olds? And how would the proposed tax cut affect expansion of pre-K?
I would love to see pre-K for all 4-year-olds in the state. My children had the great benefit of attending a public preschool program in the Jackson Public Schools, and it was great. And every child in Mississippi ought to have that opportunity. We do have these collaboratives, which are great. I'm for those too. But ideally, we would have state pre-K for every student in Mississippi that wants to go, or they're in a pre-K program somewhere, whether it's in a public school, a private school, parochial school. But it's just, if we all know that those years matter the most, and I hope we can expand it as much as possible. What would a tax cut do? tax cut, the tax cut that has been proposed would reduce significantly the state budget, which would then reduce everything in the state budget. And the largest part of the state budget is education. So that is, again, because we've got to balance the budget. We can't cut taxes and still spend the same amount of money. We've got to balance the budget. So, but I think there's been strong bipartisan support for early childhood education, and if we can just protect funding, I think we can expand it.
Representative McCarty?
I'm on mute. Sorry about that. I just made, so that's what I get for laughing at Senator Blount. I got to make that mistake at least once, even after a year of doing this. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, early childhood education was one of the big things that when I campaigned, I talked a lot about, and I think the science and the evidence is there that is the best investment we can make in our young people, and the payoff of that over time is huge. So, there are estimates all over the place for what it would cost to do a statewide 4-year-old pre-K program, but the commonality between all the estimates is that it's not relatively that much money. We could launch a quality, pre-K program, public pre-K program for those who want it for 60, 70, $80 million, which is a lot of money, surely, but not when you look at the impact that could have in Mississippi over the long run. I know everybody on the call knows this, but I mean, the brain is nearly fully developed by the time a child enters kindergarten. And depending on what kind of what exposure they've had to different things in those 0 to 4 years is going to have a huge impact on how well they do in kindergarten, first, second grade. So the quicker we can get to young people and educate them and teach them while they're teachable, the bigger impact we'll have in every, I'm like pounding the table talking to people about this because there's no better way to benefit the long-term health of the state of Mississippi and its people than to educate people while they're easier to educate. So I think that's definitely needs to be a priority. Again, it's not very expensive. I authored a bill this year with Senator Wiggins in the Senate to increase the amount of money that is paid. The state puts into the collaboratives so that basically so that the amount of funding per child is increased to $5,000 per student, half from the collaborative or from the collaborative partner and half from the state. And I hope to see that, make it out. That bill has to go to conference as well, but I hope to see that those provisions make it out of the bill, because that's the program that we have now. It's working very well. We've gotten a lot of national attention for the quality of our collaboratives because we've done it slowly and we've done it the right way. So I hope to see us continue to put more money into that. And I think right now we have 18 collaboratives. We need to expand that. I mean, now is the time to do that across the state in areas with a high need. Again, it's, you don't have to, one of the concerns I got when I was campaigning from voters was, well, I don't want you to make me send my kid to pre-K. And I said, well, we're not doing that. It's optional, but it's there if you want it. I went to pre-K. And I think that, my siblings went to pre-K, and that was one of the things that I think set us up well moving into, kindergarten, was that we had all this prep that a lot of students I was up against didn't. So when we talk about equity, giving students across the state that same opportunity is incredibly important.
Great. All right, we got a couple of school choice questions here. I'm going to go, because we're running short on time, I'm going to go ahead and read both of them, although they're on slightly different topics. One is about charter schools, one is about vouchers. So I'm going to go ahead and read them both and let you all address them at the same time. The charter school question says, will charter schools be allowed to open new charter schools in school districts that are rated D or F under ratings from 2 years ago? Some school districts have improved, but have not had an opportunity to get new ratings. Allowing new charter schools to locate in our district due to outdated ratings seems unfair. And then the question about vouchers is, I am so glad the legislature added some accountability to the ESA voucher program. Giving publicly funded vouchers to children with special needs so they can attend private schools with no special education programs is ridiculous. The same people who push for that voucher program want private school vouchers for all children. What is your view on expanding vouchers?
I'm against expanding vouchers. Obviously, any parent can make the right choice for for their family on where their child goes to school. That's their right. It's a free country, but I'm against using public money for private schools. And a parents campaign was very instrumental in getting that voucher program, or ES, Educational Scholarship Account program, bringing some more accountability to it. And it passed again in a bipartisan way through the House Education Committee, Senate Education Committee last year. It's much more accountable than it was, and I think, frankly, does not need to be, those accountability measures do not need to be loosened. The trick with charter schools, I don't frankly know how that's going to work out this year. It is a 1-year blip because of COVID. I don't think you're going to see districts, and Representative McCarty if I get this wrong, please correct me, but I don't think you're going to see districts get grades for this year because of all the challenges that. So I think what that means for charter schools, it seems your options could be either no charter schools for next year because nobody got grades, or you freeze the existing grades in place for a year. I don't know how that will be dealt with, but it's a 1-year blip in my opinion, and we'll just get through it. I'm not in favor of expanding the charter school law beyond what we have now, which I didn't vote for, but I certainly wouldn't be in favor of loosening the eligibility for charter schools.
Yeah, so to briefly touch on that, I think you pretty much summed it up correctly, Senator Blount, about how the accountability is going to work this year. The governor issued an executive order that basically waives all of that for the year, so there will be no letter grades assigned. So, and Nancy, you and I talked about this briefly. We were up against a deadline and didn't have time to get a good, or didn't have any vehicle to put it in, about freezing that, basically authorizing no new charters for this school year because there were no new grades given. The interpretation from one of our attorneys was that because there would be no grades assigned, there could be no approval of charters because there would be no grades to base them on. So I have not had a chance to circle back on that and see if that was the ultimate determination, but that was the feedback I got at the time, because I know we had talked about trying to find a way to put some kind of restriction on it for this coming school year, so that there was basically a hold for a year until we could get new grades issued. So that's good. Again, like Senator Blount, I'm not for expanding that program. I wasn't here to vote on it either way. The final legislation, I think, addressed a lot of the concerns I had just as a private citizen watching that process go down, limiting it to districts on the lower end of the accountability scale. But again, I think that may be something we need to look at. As far as vouchers go, I'm 100% opposed to vouchers. I would not have voted for the original voucher program as it passed. I think there was clearly, and that was clearly the intent, was to create kind of a Wild West voucher program that was, different in name only, or exclusive in name only, and not really actually no accountability, no method to hold anyone accountable. I think the changes we passed last year were very much needed and addressed a lot of those concerns. So the program as it stands now, I know there are a lot of children who are going to schools that specialize in the area in which their disability is, and I think that is I'm okay with that. But as far as expanding it to all private schools or any student that attends a public school in the previous year or whatever it was before, I'm not in favor of that. I don't think there was no discussion of doing anything with that this year. I kind of I'm glad to see that the push behind a lot of those like charter and voucher things has kind of subsided. I think they were very, the changes last year were not well liked by the voucher community, and they really didn't have any impact on the ultimate outcome. They passed overwhelmingly of the House and Senate, and then the governor obviously signed it into law. So I think that is hopefully fizzled for the foreseeable future. There are certainly more productive conversations to have regarding education than vouchers and expanding, charters and things like that. So I'm glad to see that's where the focus has been in the legislature.
Great, thank you. And I can tell you that my colleagues in other states are really suffering through a big push in other states to expand voucher programs, even in places like Arizona, where there was a ballot initiative and the voters made it very clear they do not want vouchers, and yet their legislature is trying to push through a very broad voucher program. So we are grateful for the legislature that we have that it's not doing that, and that in fact tighten that bill up. So that's good news for Mississippi. There's a question about mental health and health care services in schools. It says, thank you for answering our questions. What is your thought toward increasing health and mental health services within the school system?
Well, I guess the way it works now is it all comes back to funding and whether we're funding our schools, and then the district then can make those decisions at the local level. What we don't want to do, and I think it would be a mistake, is for the state to mandate additional services at the same time we're cutting funding. We need to increase funding and let local districts then make those decisions about how best to serve their children. And obviously mental health, goodness, particularly this year, and maybe coming out of this year is more important than ever. But we've got, in my opinion, we ought to increase funding for districts and let them make decisions that best meet the needs of their students.
Yes, I agree with that. Absolutely. I think that's a huge issue, a huge area we're going to need to address. We've needed to address it, and it's only been exacerbated by the pandemic, mental health in schools and our young people. And I think that one of the ways that we had kind of looked at addressing it in the House, and we passed a bill to do this last year. I think it was kind of one of the casualties of COVID last year. It kind of got lost in the mix. And then this year we had a similar bill in the House and the Senate to offer trauma-informed training to teachers to allow them to identify the signs of trauma, not just physical trauma, but emotional neglect, things like that students may be facing at home that affects their ability to learn, especially as they're younger and earlier on in their school. So we unfortunately we're not able to get that out this year, but I think that is, when we talk about cost, that's a relatively low cost way for us to equip our teachers to, identify those signs in students and look for the specifics. And I hate to put even more on teachers, but that is, the not requiring that they provide the care, providing them with the resources to identify it. And then also from there, you have to, and that was another part of the bill, was to increase the presence of counselors in schools, so that the teacher, again, is not working as teacher and counselor, but teacher referred to a counselor. Because in a lot of our schools, there is not a strong counselor presence because of funding. So that was something that I would like for us to continue looking at. And again, it does come back to funding. We've got to make sure that the schools have resources to pay counselors, because a lot of them, the reason why there aren't counselors in their schools is because they simply don't have the money. When they look at the fact that they're so underfunded that their local allocation is going towards paying teacher salaries. Their MAP allocation doesn't even cover that, which is the biggest part of what the MAP allocation should cover. So again, it is all about funding. But I think that's something we definitely need to address. Because it's only going to get worse as time goes on.
Great, thank you. All right, I know we have 4 minutes left, so we have a couple of questions about dyslexia, just asking about if the legislature would do anything to provide districts with more resources, particularly funding, for to address dyslexia. And then we also have a question in the chat asking if you all know any specific news about the amount of the latest federal stimulus funding that we'll be getting and when that would arrive. So those are two different issues, but I know you all need to go, so I'll let you answer them all at the same time.
I do not know any specifics about the federal legislation that the president signed today. I would say that I would hope that the legislature maintains maximum flexibility to come back at a time that the legislature decides to deal with everything that's in that package. And I know it's a lot. We need time to digest it, and I hope we can come back at a time of our choosing before January, once we figure it out and have a plan. Dyslexia, big problem, growing problem. We have a bill which I know has passed the Senate. I've lost track of where it is. Nancy may know, that will help our students with dyslexia this year with their IEPs. And then we need more funding, obviously, to help and train people who can work with students who have dyslexia. But we do have a bill in the works that will help with that this year.
Yes, that bill, Senator Blount, I think is House Bill 754, I believe, and I'm sure that Nancy probably knows the exact number, but that is back in the House, I think, for concurrence as well. So I think that's, and that bill, or may have to go to conference. That's where I get confused this year, because I think everything is going to conference, it feels like. So I think, that bill did address the students having access to, or the state acknowledging or recognizing dyslexia. Specifically, I think before it was not specifically acknowledged as something that you could get an IEP for. It was kind of a vague thing that we tightened up with this language. And then it also, and I'm not sure the final bill, its final state, if it'll include this, but also included some dyslexia training as well for school districts. So that was in the House version. I think that was taken out of the Senate version. So I don't know what'll happen whenever the two versions come together. But that's obviously, again, comes back to funding. I think that the dyslexia therapists that we've kind of increased a little bit of that funding here in recent years have made a difference. And I know I've talked to some teachers in my district who are, there's one in particular whose both of her children are dyslexic, and she's basically pleading with us to provide resources because she's got the resources to put her children in therapy, dyslexia therapy, and get them the help they need. But there are so many people in the state that don't have that, and don't even maybe even recognize the fact that their child has dyslexia because they haven't ever been able to get the test. So I know Senator or Representative Byrd in my area has done for years legislation to provide money to cover dyslexia, the screening test. It's a very expensive test, and I think his bill covers $800 of that, I believe, which is just insane to me that it even costs that much money. But I don't think that bill's ever really gotten much traction. But I've talked to him several times about doing anything I can to help push that. I know it's always an issue of funding, but again, and I've said this 1,000 times, and I know everybody on this Zoom agrees with me. There's no better place for us to invest the money that we have than in our young people, in our schools, and in our teachers. And we've got to get back to that. And I think we are getting back to that. I think, Senator Blount has certainly mentioned that. And he's been here obviously longer than me, and I've seen the legislature through several, different changes in leadership. And I think that just as a citizen of Mississippi from my whole life, I can tell the change in the last 2 years. Even though I wasn't in the legislature, I was still watching, and I can tell the change now. The emphasis that's placed on education has definitely increased, and I hope that continues to be the case. I know the Lieutenant Governor in particular has been very strong for education for a long time, and I know that our chairman, on the House side, Chairman Bennett, comes from a family of educators on the school board for a long time. He is certainly an advocate for public schools, and so it's been great to work under him and to see what he's been able to do as far as the attitude in the House is concerned towards public education. So that was a really long roundabout answer about dyslexia, but again, I think that's one of the big issues we've got to look at tackling. And I hope that some of this money, especially the money that's gone into education, has enough flexibility. And I'm also not familiar with the new law, but there's a lot that goes directly into education. And I hope that the dyslexia therapy program that we have now with dyslexia therapists that are working on the ground in districts, we can expand that, because I think where we've used that and where we've been able to put that in place, it has made a difference. So hopefully that's an area where if the funding is not, super restrictive, or if there's no way we can pull funding from somewhere else, I would love to see us put more money into that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I know both of our speakers have other obligations this evening and need to run, but join me in thanking them for a terrific evening. Great answers to our questions, and there are lots of thank yous in the chat box to you both. So thank you for your time. We appreciate your commitment, and look forward. We're going to invite you back. We look forward to having you back with us again soon. And thank you to everyone who attended. Again, we'll be sharing the link so that you can share it with your friends to watch the recorded version of this. And we'll be planning more of these we've gotten a terrific response from these real talk sessions. Y'all love talking to your legislators, and that's great. So we're going to be coordinating more of these, and we'll let you know when those are. So keep watching for those emails and social media posts. If you are not already a member, I think Karen Johnson put a link to get our emails in the chat. So please sign up there to get our emails so you'll know about these sessions and be able to keep up with how your legislators vote on very important bills. So thank you again to Senator Blount and Representative McCarty for a great evening. We'll let everybody go now and get on with your evenings, and look forward to a time when we can be back together again soon. Yes, thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Keep up
thank
the
y'all
good
so
work.
much. Absolutely. Thank y'all.